Chapter 4019. Ever since his conversation with Di Baichen, he knew that Di Baichen doted on his wife very much. Thinking about it, wherever Bailey Hongzhuang was, he would definitely be there. The two of them would definitely not be separated. A joyful smile appeared on Elder Di's face. He couldn't help but pace back and forth in his old age. That's great. I'll be able to see the young master soon. I'll make a trip to the Penglai Palace. Di Yujue's face was full of smiles. Originally, he was worried that Di Baichen would go somewhere else. If that was the case, it would probably take some time to find him. He didn't expect that Di Baichen would be in the Penglai Palace on Penglai Island. He only needed to look for him. Elder Di nodded repeatedly. Good, good, good. In the next second, Di Yujue quickly left the Golden Flame auction house. He really wanted to reunite with Di Baichen as soon as possible. Apart from seeing his son when he was young, he hadn't interacted with him for more than 20 years. He only hoped that Di Baichen would forgive him. When the time came, he would be able to bring Di Baichen back to his family. Thinking about how happy his family would be when they found out about this, he couldn't help but feel overjoyed. How many years had it been? He had never been so happy. Ever since the teleportation array in the training ground was sealed, all the cultivators in the Penglai Inner Palace had returned. This scene could be said to be the most lively time. Usually, most of the disciples in the Inner Palace were training in the training ground. It was already good enough that half of them stayed in the Inner Palace. Now that everyone had gathered together, they realized that there were actually many people in the Inner Palace. The cultivation area had become the most popular place. Since they couldn't go to the training ground, naturally, most people wanted to cultivate. Therefore, they all rushed to the cultivation area. Fortunately, we came early and occupied the rooms in the cultivation area. Otherwise, if it was now, it wouldn't be easy to get a room. Ao Lingxiao couldn't help but sigh. Recently, he had completely focused all his attention on cultivation. Therefore, he had completely taken root here. I wonder how long it will take before I can enter this training ground. Although I don't have a good impression of that place, it's quite boring to stay in this training area all the time. Chu Jinfeng spread out his hands, a hint of curiosity appearing between his brows. Recently, the discussion about this matter has been getting louder and louder. Usually, the matters of the training grounds are not known to outsiders, but now that so many people have suddenly decided not to go, the people outside can't help but talk about it. I heard that someone came back last night, but there hasn't been any news yet. I'm afraid it will be soon, Ren Ziheng said. It took me so long to come back. Looking at the situation, the things in the training ground should be very difficult to deal with. Mo Yunjue said in a low voice. The experts of the three great powers went together, but they took such a long time, and there was no movement. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Just as everyone was discussing, Renzime quickly ran in front of everyone and said breathlessly, Something big has happened. What's the big deal? Ren Ziheng quickly asked. Phew! Renzime gasped for breath. Bailey Hongzhuang poured a cup of tea for her and said, Drink some water first. Don't worry, speak slowly. Chapter 4020. What kind of amazing thing appeared? Chu Jinfeng could not hide his curiosity. We were talking about this before. It seems like a relic has appeared, Ren Zime said. Now everyone is paying attention to this matter. Everyone is talking about it, but this news is true. It was spread by the teachers in the hall. Relic? Everyone said in unison, their faces flashing with disbelief. Renzime nodded. That's right. It's a relic. Then why would a relic appear in the training grounds? That's a place where dark forces are abundant. When Xiren said in astonishment. I don't know about that. When I heard the news, I hurried over to tell you. I heard that the hall master will explain it personally later, so now everyone is rushing to the square. Let's hurry over there too. Ren Zime said. Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry over. Bachin stood up. Although he had only heard a little bit of the news, he knew that it was definitely not simple. In the next moment, everyone got up and walked out together. As they walked out, they also found that other cultivators were rushing out, as if they were going to the same place. I don't know who left behind the relic, but it actually appeared in the Darklands. It's really a little shocking. Shangguan Yingying could not help but sigh. A relic was a rare opportunity. If it had appeared in other places, she would not have found it strange. However, it appeared in the training grounds, which was very strange. It was said that this training grounds had existed for many years. For so many years, not a single blade of grass grew, and it was a place where the skeleton army ran rampant. Who could build a relic here? Usually, there are so many cultivators who go to the training grounds. If someone wanted to build a relic there, it is impossible that no one would have discovered it. Bailey Hongzhuang thought about it and said, "This was already very strange. According to this judgment, there is only one possibility." Bachin said slowly. "What possibility?" "This relic has something to do with dark forces," Bachin and Mo Yunjua said in unison. After the two of them finished speaking, they realized that the other party had the same thoughts as them. They couldn't help but look at each other and smile. Something to do with the power of darkness? Ziren raised his eyebrows. Then, this ruin should have been left behind many years ago? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. That should be the case. Only at that time it would not be noticed by everyone. If it was later, no one would choose to build a relic in a place where the skeleton army could appear at any time. Maybe it would be destroyed by the skeleton army before it was built. That's true. Ren Ziheng agreed. However, since this ruin can exist in the training grounds for so many years, the restriction must be very powerful. In that case, the experts in the hall haven't been in the hall all this time. Could it be that they went to explore the ruins? Ao Lingxiao said in surprise. As soon as he said this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. This was very likely. Chapter 40-21. Hearing Ao Lingxiao's words, everyone couldn't help but nod their heads. If anyone can master the power of darkness, then they'll really be a great expert. However, the people of Penglai Island hate the power of darkness. If a cultivator masters such a power, I'm afraid he'll be targeted by others, right? Renzime frowned. Naturally, everyone would want to have an incomparably powerful power. However, once this power was displayed, everyone would target it. It didn't seem to be a good thing. That's a matter of opinion. If he's really so powerful, then no one can be his opponent. What's there to be afraid of? Mo Yunjua said faintly, as if he didn't care about the possibility raised by Renzime. Their Shurtian pavilion had always been rejected by everyone. However, weren't there still many people who needed help from them? Even if they didn't like them, they would still secretly come to them for help. The so-called rejection was just a high-sounding excuse. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. There's no good or evil in power itself. It just depends on how the person who masters it uses it. In fact, we don't know what happened hundreds of years ago. No one knows what the person who possessed the power of darkness did, so it's impossible to make a conclusion. That's right. Bachin agreed. Maybe the person who mastered the power of darkness didn't do anything that angered people. It's just that he was too powerful and made many people feel threatened, so everyone attacked him together. After all, the hunter shoots the bird that sticks out. Anyone who's too outstanding will easily be targeted. Junior Brother D's words are reasonable. This time, the experts of the three major forces went to study it for such a long time. Maybe they've already obtained the inheritance. It's a pity. We didn't have the chance to go. Otherwise, if we could obtain this inheritance, our strength would definitely improve greatly. Ren Ziheng couldn't help but sigh. This kind of opportunity wasn't so easy to come by. Once they got hold of it, they would have a meteoric rise. Unfortunately, they didn't even have the chance to understand it. When they found out, it was already the result. Looking at Ren Ziheng's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. Senior brother Ren, don't be sad. There will be more opportunities in the future. That's right. This kind of thing is destined to happen. If it's not destined to happen, then don't force it. If it doesn't happen to us, then there's no point in thinking about it. Ao Lingxiao consoled. As someone from the upper realm, he had a deeper understanding of the power of darkness than anyone else. Naturally, he also understood how powerful the power of darkness was. He did not expect the inheritance of darkness to appear here. If the people from the upper realm were to find out about this opportunity, they would also fight over it. If he could master the power of darkness, perhaps he would be able to snatch his family back from the hands of that bitch. It was a pity that he didn't have the chance to do so until now. Along the way, they discovered that everyone along the way was discussing this matter. That fervent appearance was as if the most lively thing had happened. Chapter 40-22. No wonder they didn't allow any of us to enter earlier. They wanted to monopolize this opportunity. Isn't this a little too unkind? No matter what, we are also disciples of the Penglai Inner Palace. Even if there is a chance, it should be a fair competition. How can they make all of us stay outside and give this chance to them? That's right. This is too much. How can they convince everyone? In an instant, everyone discussed animatedly. Their words were filled with dissatisfaction. Clearly, they had already guessed the general situation. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest could not help but look at each other when they saw this. Looks like everyone has a deep grudge about this. When Xiren said with a faint smile, this matter will definitely cause everyone's resentment. After all, it's impossible for anyone not to be moved by such a huge benefit. It would have been fine if everyone didn't know about it. Now that everyone knows about it, they'll definitely be upset. I'm afraid things aren't as we thought. Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. If that's really the case, Penglai Palace doesn't need to tell us about this at all. They can find other reasons to cover up this matter and it won't cause everyone's dissatisfaction. It's a thankless task to tell everyone everything. Di Baichen nodded. That's right. It looks like this matter is a little different from what we thought before. Let's hurry and take a look. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest arrived at their destination, they realized that there were many cultivators around them. At that moment, they had completely surrounded the place and were waiting for the palace master to explain the matter. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest noticed that Master Long and Instructor Yi, who they had not seen before, were here. Master Long obviously noticed them as well and immediately nodded at them. Seeing this, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others all smiled. Not long after, when almost all the disciples had gathered, Bai Tsangming's figure slowly appeared in front of everyone. Greetings, Palace Master. All the cultivators bowed together. Their faces were filled with respect. As the Penglai Palace's Palace Master, Bai Tsangming was extremely powerful and had always been an object of worship and respect. Bai Tsangming nodded slightly as a warm smile appeared on his dignified face. Everyone has arrived. Today, I have something to tell everyone. As soon as Bai Tsangming spoke, the originally clamorous environment instantly quieted down. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Only Bai Tsangming's voice resounded in the entire area. I'm sure everyone is very curious about what happened in the training grounds during this period of time. I'll take this opportunity to tell everyone about it. Everyone's gazes became fervent as they looked at Bai Tsangming curiously. They were truly curious about this matter. Previously, we discovered that the skeletons in the training grounds had mysteriously evolved. This attracted our attention, so we joined forces with the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect to investigate this matter. During the research process, we searched for a while and discovered that a ruin had appeared in the training ground. This relic is completely black. When we discovered it, there were many skeletons gathered here. The reason why these skeletons can evolve is all because of this relic. Chapter 40-23. Everyone knew about the recent evolution of the skeleton army, but no one expected that there would be such a complicated reason. According to our judgment, this ruin is probably related to the energy of darkness. The skeleton army is able to obtain nourishment from the energy emitted by this ruin and progress. Therefore, it's very likely that this ruin was left behind by the cultivator who grasped the energy of darkness. Sure enough, this is the case. Di Baichen muttered. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Di Baichen. It seems that this ruin is extremely dangerous. Currently, there are many skeleton armies gathered around this ruin. Moreover, there are restrictions around this ruin, so we can't enter it for a while. In the end, the three great forces have decided to give this opportunity to everyone after a discussion. As soon as he said that, the eyes of all the cultivators present lit up, and intense excitement flashed in their eyes. There's actually such a good opportunity. It's obvious that this ruin is definitely extraordinary. If we can obtain the inheritance, we'll be amazing in the future. Yes, perhaps these skeletons will directly listen to our orders in the future. At that time, when they imagined the scene after obtaining the inheritance of the energy of darkness, their hearts couldn't help but beat faster. This was really a great opportunity. Bai Tsangming had a faint smile on his face as he listened to the discussions of the disciples below the stage. He wasn't anxious at all. After all, this news was indeed very shocking. After a short while, Bai Tsangming continued, "Everyone, please don't get too excited because of this news. According to our judgment, this ruin is extremely dangerous, and there are various unpredictable possibilities inside. Therefore, everyone must be extra careful after entering. No matter what, your own life is the most important." After hearing Bai Tsangming's reminder, everyone recovered from their previous excitement, and a trace of seriousness and solemnity appeared on their faces. As Inner Palace disciples, all of you have fought with the skeleton army many times, so you naturally know how powerful the skeleton army is. The fact that this ruin can appear in the training grounds and the skeleton army can evolve because of it is obvious that there's a connection between the two. After a joint discussion between the three major forces, we have decided to seal the entrance after you all enter. We will not allow other cultivators to enter in order to avoid any unforeseen circumstances. As a result, once you enter, not only will you face the dangers of the ruins, but you will also face competition with the cultivators of the 100 Flowers sect and the Crimson Moon sect. Swords have no eyes, everyone must be careful. Bai Tsangming's expression turned grave. Although the leaders of the three forces seemed to have a good relationship, they were all competitors in private. Needless to say, the cultivators in their sects would often have conflicts when they were in the training ground. It could be said that the grudges between them were not small. This time, the inner hall disciples of the three great powers had gathered together, and the scene was absolutely not to be underestimated. Naturally, he hoped that the cultivators in his sect would be able to obtain the inheritance. However, he had to remind everyone that obtaining the inheritance was not an easy task. If they were not careful, they might lose their lives there. Even with his reminder, he could still predict that after this incident, the number of cultivators who died was not small. Chapter 40-24. Upon hearing Bai Tsangming's reminder, everyone's expression turned grave. Usually, there were many fights between the disciples of the three major forces, and this time, it would probably erupt. Just the thought of that scene alone was enough to understand how shocking it would be. When facing the skeleton army, I hope that all of you can face the enemy together with the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect. When facing the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect, I also hope that all of you can support each other. We will follow your instructions, Palace Master. Everyone replied in unison. Bai Tsangming revealed a satisfied expression when he saw the reaction of the crowd. This was all that he could do, and the rest would depend on the disciples' own opportunities. The appearance of a relic definitely meant that there was an opportunity. However, the opportunity this time was rather special, and no one knew who would obtain it in the end. Everyone, make your choice within 2 hours. Once you enter, you won't be able to come out anytime soon. Similarly, if you don't enter within 2 hours, you won't have the chance to enter before the relic ends. Izihua stepped forward and explained the situation to everyone. You only have 2 hours to prepare. Regardless of what you need, it's best to prepare it now. If there are no questions, you can start now. As soon as Izihua finished speaking, all the cultivators present were stunned for a moment before they scattered in all directions. It was obvious that everyone had gone to prepare. However, there was also a group of cultivators who looked hesitant. These cultivators were usually weaker and did not have much confidence in participating in such a fight. After all, when such a group of heroes gathered, almost all the cultivators would gather in one place. Faced with a group of Starlight Realm cultivators, it was really difficult for them to defeat them with their abilities. On the contrary, they might even lose their lives for nothing if they went. In the face of benefits, they had to consider carefully whether to preserve their lives or take the risk. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest did not delay and immediately started to move. Only 2 hours. That's really tight. Everyone doesn't even have time to think. Ziren quickened his pace and could not help but lament. Baichen's eyes darkened. I think the 3 major forces don't want others to know about this and possibly interfere, so they only gave us such a short time. Once they enter, they will seal the entrance and no one else can enter. This is also to protect their own interests. That's right. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded, then looked at Ao Lingxiao and the rest. What are your plans? None of you plan to give up, right? Listening to Bailey Hongzhuang's question, Ren Ziheng and the others all nodded. Such a good opportunity, whoever gives it up would be a fool. That's right. Although the chances are slim, as long as there's a chance, it's worth a try. What if we succeed? No one knew if this luck would be. If that's the case, then let's go pack up our things. After packing up, we'll meet at the transmission array. Baichen said. In the next moment, everyone nodded and returned to their rooms. After this trip, no one knew how long it would take, so they had to be well prepared. Chapter 40-25. After everything was ready, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others gathered at the teleportation array. When they arrived, they saw that the teleportation array was already full of cultivators. At this moment, they were queuing up one after another to be teleported. Such a scene was truly rare to see. From the looks of it, I'm afraid that most of the disciples of the inner hall are here. We packed up fast enough, but I didn't expect that there would be so many people faster than us. Shangguan Yingying's eyes were full of amazement. They packed up as fast as they could, but they didn't expect others to be so fast. Such a rare opportunity, no one wants to miss it. It's normal for everyone to have such a reaction. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. There is only a total of 2 hours. If we are slow, maybe the teleportation will be over before it's his turn. That would be a tragedy. For such a big thing, who dares to waste a little time? It's safer to go early. When Ziren said with a smile. Ren Ziheng nodded. That's true. When I came, I found that many cultivators were running. We couldn't help but speed up. When they were queuing up, most of the cultivators had already formed a team. They didn't dare to ignore the hall master's reminder. This trip was so dangerous that they had to act with a team to reduce the danger. Therefore, everyone was teleporting in a team with the best relationship they had on normal days. When Ziren and the others used to have a good relationship with other teams, but since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others came to the inner hall, they became a fixed team. After queuing for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were successfully teleported to the training place. There were also many cultivators of the inner hall of Penglai near them. Almost immediately, everyone walked forward without hesitation. According to the direction that the hall master had mentioned before, this relic was in the center of the training place. They had to reach the center as soon as possible to see the relic with their own eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others hurried without stopping. Although the restriction on the relic had not been lifted, no one knew when it would be lifted. Maybe it would be lifted in the blink of an eye. With so many competitors, it was naturally better to arrive as soon as possible. For a time, the group seemed to be competing in speed as they hurried forward. Such a scene had never appeared in the history of the Penglai Palace. The scope of the training ground was very wide. Even if everyone used their fastest speed, it was still not something that could be reached in a short while. At night, the skeleton army appeared. However, this was probably the most fearless time for the Penglai Palace disciples. Normally, a team would have at most 20 people. Facing a large army of skeletons, everyone could only be cautious. However, at that moment, over 100 people were moving together. Merely their auras were completely different. Without any hesitation, everyone took out their weapons and charged towards the skeleton army. Advance courageously. Fearless. The skeleton army obviously didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Under the joint attack of everyone, the speed at which the skeleton army was annihilated was astonishing. The eerie white bones turned into powder under their hands, completely disappearing from the world. Chapter 40:26. Haha, we usually have to run and hide whenever we run into these fellows. Now we can finally slaughter them. Let's show these disgusting fellows our power. We'll kill our way through. Charge! Everyone raised their weapons high as the energy within their bodies surged. Their aura was terrifying. Dazzling and colorful martial arts techniques exploded. They were as dazzling and brilliant as fireworks in the dark night. Even though the skeleton army had evolved, they were still unable to hold on in the face of everyone's crazy attack. The speed at which they dispersed was very fast. The Lich was chanting with all his might. Bailey Hongzhuang held the nine-tailed zither in her hand, and the sound of the zither continued to pour out from her hands. The other cultivators in the group, who were proficient in sound attacks, also used all their skills to resist the Lich's chanting. In a short period of time, the skeleton army realized that the group's aura was simply too shocking. Immediately, they all entered the pit and disappeared from everyone's sight. When they saw the skeleton army fleeing, everyone could not help but smile brightly. Usually, the skeleton army was their nightmare. They never thought that they would be able to chase the skeleton army away. This feeling was extremely satisfying. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were hurriedly gathering at the center of the training grounds, the Hundred Flowers Order and the Crimson Moon sect were not slow either. This was not only a competition for their personal benefits but also for the benefit of their respective sections. After 2 hours, the three great organizations joined forces to seal off the entrance, preventing anyone from entering. Not only that, they had also sealed off the other entrance. Similarly, the people from the upper realm were not allowed to enter. This was because this was a benefit that they had fought for their own cultivators. After 3 days of hurrying, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally arrived at their destination. In their line of sight, the most eye-catching thing was a pitch-black building. In this pitch-black environment, it appeared exceptionally cold and majestic. It was unique and perfectly blended in together. The style of this ruin was completely different from what Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had seen before. Even though the other ruins were also very grand and magnificent, the lines of this building were filled with gentleness. However, the ruins in front of them gave off a cold and sharp feeling, causing them to not dare to approach it. In this dark world, it exuded a unique charm, mystery, coldness, and fatal attraction. Around the ruins, everyone also noticed the large group of skeletons. These skeletons seemed to be guarding the ruins. Liches and skeleton soldiers appeared in large numbers, not to mention the skeleton army. This scale was much more terrifying than the skeleton army that they had encountered in the past. Oh my God, there are so many skeletons gathered here. Isn't this a little too terrifying? Just passing through these skeletons and entering the ruins won't be an easy task. After hearing the temple master's words, I knew that these ruins would not be easy to explore. However, the scene before me is even more frightening and shocking than I had imagined. I finally understand why the experts in the palace stayed here for so long. Who knows how long it would take to kill all these skeletons? Chapter 40:27. This scene is a little terrifying. Ao Lingxiao couldn't help but say. Just looking at the black mass in front of them was enough to make one's scalp numb. Indeed. Shangguan Yingying frowned and looked a little hesitant. There are so many skeletons. How are we going to deal with them? Bailey Hongzhuang pondered and said, I'm afraid it's impossible to deal with them. The only thing we can do is to pass through these skeletons and enter. This is because there are too many skeletons in the training ground. Even if we can kill these skeletons, new skeletons may join in at any time. In this way, there will be no end to it. Just taking turns is enough to grind all of us to death. Hong Zhuang is right. Mo Yunjua nodded. We can only outsmart them. However, there are so many skeletons. It will be difficult for us to take advantage of them. Ren Zimei's face was a little ugly. Just looking at the situation in front of them, she felt that the possibility of success was too small. Although there are many skeletons, we have a lot of people. Once the cultivators of the three forces gather, the skeletons won't be able to stop everyone. So the possibility of us taking advantage of them is still very high. Di Beichen smiled faintly. That's right. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. We'll find a way when the time comes. Ren Ziheng agreed. Let's rest here for the time being. Judging from the situation of the restriction, it won't disappear for a while. Why don't we rest here and adjust ourselves to the best condition? Once the restriction disappears, we'll start moving. Bailey Hongzhuang suggested. Chu Jinfeng looked at the faint layer of black restriction in the distance and couldn't help but ask, why don't we try to break this restriction? It can't be broken. Di Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Mo Yunjua all answered at once. Hearing this, Chu Jinfeng was slightly stunned and asked, why? If it could be broken, the experts of the three forces would have already done it when they came here. They wouldn't have waited until now. Di Beichen explained. I see. Chu Jinfeng finally understood. I'm really muddle-headed. I actually forgot about this. Just as everyone was discussing, they saw the figures of the 100 Flowers Gate disciples in the distance. The 100 Flowers Gate is quite fast as well. They arrived so quickly, Renzime said. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the 100 Flowers Gates team and immediately realized that the 100 Flowers Gates team was smaller than the Penglai palaces. However, the 100 Flowers Gates' focus was on alchemy and medicine. Although they also cultivated, they couldn't compare to the Penglai palace, which specialized in cultivation. At the same time, the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect also appeared in another direction. The three major forces stood in three different directions, surrounding the black relic in the center. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the center. However, no one dared to act rashly and alert the skeletons. The three parties were in a balance. Whoever provoked the skeletons first would be at a disadvantage. As a result, even though a large number of cultivators had gathered nearby, it was still extremely quiet. Everyone was waiting for an opportunity to strike. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and began to cultivate. According to her judgment, it would take quite some time for the restriction to disappear. Chapter 40:28. Di Yujue immediately rushed to Penglai Palace. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to enter Penglai Palace. However, for Di Yujue, this was nothing at all. After he arrived at Penglai Palace, he only needed to report his name and walked into Penglai Palace unimpeded. After Long Yanwei and Yizihua found out that Di Yujue had actually come to Penglai Palace, they could not help but be surprised. They knew very well that Di Yujue was a person from the upper realm and his status was extremely high. Although their status on Penglai Island was not bad, they were nothing in front of Diujue. Young Master D, we are honored by your presence. Penglai Palace is truly honored. Long Yanwei bowed to Diujue, his expression filled with respect. The young and handsome man in front of him was an expert who was stronger than the palace master. In addition to his illustrious background, he was also extremely impressed. Seeing Long Yanwei and Izihua, Diujue's face also revealed a smile. So it's young Master Long and young Master E. Young Master D, may I know why you have come to Penglai Palace today? Izihua could not help but ask. Penglai Palace was a very impressive place to others, but to someone like Diujue, it was not attractive at all. He was very clear about this point. However, Diujue had suddenly come here. There must be something. Otherwise, with how busy Diujue was, he would not have come here for a stroll out of boredom. Diujue cupped his hands. To be honest, I came to Penglai Palace today to look for someone. I hope that the two of you can help me guide the way. As Diujue's voice fell, Izihua and Long Yanwei could not help but look at each other. Both of their eyes flashed with intense surprise. With Diujue's status, he actually came to Penglai Palace personally to look for someone. They were really curious about what kind of person was worthy of Diujue personally coming to look for someone. Young Master D, please speak. As long as it's someone from Penglai Palace, we will immediately find him. I wonder if Di Baichen is in Penglai Palace. Diujue asked. Hearing the name Di Baichen, they were even more surprised. They had not heard Di Baichen mention anything related to Diujue. Diujue had not mentioned anything about Di before. Why would he come to look for him today? Seeing Long Yanwei fall into silence, Diujue couldn't help but frown slightly. Is Di Baichen not a disciple of Penglai Palace? Only then did Izihua react. He quickly said, No, Di Baichen is our Penglai Palace's inner hall disciple. I wonder why young Master D is looking for him? He is a child of my D family. I came to look for him today to reunite with him. I hope the two of you can guide me. Diujue said calmly. Di Baichen was their D family's young master. There was nothing to hide about this. As soon as these words came out, Izihua and Long Yujue could not help but be dumbfounded. Many possibilities flashed through their minds, but no one thought that it would be such a situation. Di Baichen was actually a member of the D family? Even though both of them had the surname D, neither of them thought that Di Baichen was from the D family. Wasn't this a little too shocking? Di Baichen was actually from the upper realm? This was impossible. Chapter 40-29. Izihua's face was also full of confusion. He had never heard of this before. If Di Baichen was a member of the D family in the upper realm, then there was no need for him to join Penglai Palace at all. It was a complete waste of talent. Most importantly, with Di Baichen's identity, how could he not have a contract beast? Diujue looked at Long Yanwei and Izihua's surprised expressions and could not help but say, He is a disciple of my D family who has been wandering outside. I just received news of him not long ago, so I came to find him. Where is he now? I hope you two can lead the way for me. Listening to Diujue, Izihua and Long Yanwei finally understood. They could not help but think of the rumors they had heard before about the D family. Could it be? Di Baichen was Diujue's son who was wandering outside? Looking at the extraordinarily handsome Diujue in front of them, and then thinking of the incomparably handsome Di Baichen, it was said that Diujue's wife was also a great beauty. Thinking about it this way, it was really possible. After all, there were still a few cultivators with such outstanding looks in the world. Mr. D, this is really a bit unfortunate. Long Yanwei responded. What do you mean? Diujue was a little puzzled. Could it be that Di Baichen is no longer a disciple of your Penglai Palace? At this point, Diujue's voice suddenly became colder. If Penglai Palace dared to treat Di Baichen badly, he would not spare Penglai Palace. Seeing that Diujue misunderstood his meaning, Long Yanwei quickly explained. Mr. D, things are not what you think. D Baichen is a disciple of our Penglai Palace, but he just entered the training ground to participate in the training. I'm afraid he won't come out for a while. Hearing this, Diujue finally understood. I see. Then I'll go find him. Others did not know about the training ground of Penglai Palace, but he knew very well. This training could be done at any time, but the most important thing now was to meet each other. He already knew from Si Tuyen that Di Baichen had been looking forward to finding his biological parent. He believed that Di Baichen would be happy after knowing all this. After saying this, Diujue prepared to turn and leave. Seeing this, Izihua hurriedly stopped Diujue. Mr. D, you can't enter the training ground now. Diujue's footsteps paused slightly while a trace of bewilderment appeared between his brows. What do you mean? The three major forces have made some discoveries in this training ground, so they decided to give this opportunity to the Inner Palace disciples of the three major forces. Therefore, after the Inner Palace disciples went to the training ground, the three major forces have already joined forces to seal this teleportation array. It will only be opened after this opportunity is obtained. Mr. D, since you've already found Di Baichen, I don't think you're in a hurry. Why don't you wait for a while? Izihua looked at Diujue worriedly. If it was an ordinary person, it would be easy for them to stop him. However, facing Diujue, they did not have such confidence. If Diujue really wanted to barge in, then they really could not stop him in this way. The alliance of the three major forces would be broken, and things would become much more complicated. Mr. D, Di Baichen is an extremely outstanding Inner Palace disciple of our Penglai Palace. You only need to ask around a little to know that he is in the limelight in our Penglai Palace. Chapter 40-30. After all, young people also need to explore and search for their own opportunities. What do you think, Master D? Long Yanwei looked at Diujue. This was also an excellent opportunity for Di Baichen. If Di Baichen could obtain the inheritance, it would be very impressive. On the other hand, if Diujue decided to force his way in, it would be a huge problem that none of them could stop. Diujue frowned. For the sake of a training exercise, you actually sealed the teleportation formation? Hearing this, Long Yanwei and Izihua's expressions were somewhat awkward. This was also something that had never happened before in history. If it was any other day, it would naturally not be a problem. However, in front of Diujue, this matter was indeed. It seems that you have made quite a discovery in the training grounds. The light in Diujue's eyes changed a little. He then nodded. All right, since that's the case, I'll wait until it's over before returning. He believed that Long Yanwei and Izihua would not dare to lie to him. He only needed to go back and find out the ins and outs of this matter. However, just as Long Yanwei had said, cultivators had their own opportunities. Since Di Baichen had gone, it proved that he valued this opportunity very much. Therefore, as his father, he naturally could not stop him. He had waited for so many years. He did not mind waiting for a little longer. Only after Diujue had left did Long Yanwei and Izihua look at each other. Both of them could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. I never thought that Di Baichen was actually a member of the Di family. This is too surprising. Izihua could not help but sigh. For Diujue to personally come, I believe that Di Baichen's position in the Di family must be very high. Who knows, he might even be Diujue's son. Long Yanwei pondered and nodded. That is indeed a possibility. However, if that is really the case, then Di Baichen will be incredible in the future. Speaking of which, like father, like son, right? Izihua chuckled. Actually, even without the identity of the Di family, Di Baichen will not be an ordinary person in the future. Only Di Baichen and his group were able to leap from the 5th level of the Purple Realm to the 2nd level of the Astral Radiance Realm in such a short time. As an instructor of the Inner Palace, he had seen many outstanding cultivators. However, D. Bachen's group was the only one who could make such a leap within a year. Just the fact that they were able to obtain the inheritances of the blood-ground abyss and the demonic abyss was enough to prove that their talent and potential were extremely shocking. That's true. D. Bacchen, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Mo Yunjue are all rare cultivation geniuses. Their future achievements will probably exceed our imagination. However, with the identity of the D family, D. Bacchen was even more impressive. After all, the D family itself is a very powerful existence. Long Yanwei's eyes were filled with emotion. In his heart, he was also happy for D. Bacchen. No matter what, after wandering outside, he finally found out about his own family. This was always something to be happy about. When D. Yujue returned to the Golden Flame auction house, old D had been waiting for him to return. However, when he saw that D. Yujue had returned alone with no one else beside him, his eyes could not help but flash with a strong sense of doubt. "Young master, why are you alone? Did the young master not come back? Is he not in the Penglai Palace?" Chapter 40-31. Hearing D. Yujue's words, Elder D finally relaxed. As long as nothing unexpected happened along the way, there wouldn't be any problems. "Young master, the clansmen have been waiting for the return of the young master for many years. Why don't we go to the training grounds and find the young master? The earlier we send this news back to the clan, the happier the old master will be." D. Yujue shook his head. "I had the same thought as well. However, there seems to be a good opportunity in this training. Since Bacchen has gone, it proves that he also wants to obtain this opportunity. In the past, he was alone and we never took care of him. Now that he wants to go out and explore, we naturally can't stop him. When he returns, it won't be too late to meet him." Although the D family had a large family business, the D family's disciples often went out to train. After all, even if the family could provide the disciples with cultivation resources, they couldn't completely rely on the family. If they always relied on the family, their improvement would always be limited. Only by going out to train could they obtain things that truly belonged to them. D. Bacchen had been adventuring all these years. Although Elder D didn't see it with his own eyes, the fact that the former could become a first-rate cultivation genius in the outside world was enough to prove his hard work. He didn't want to hinder D. Bachen's development because this was his own destiny. Elder D nodded. "Young master, you're right. I was too anxious." D. Yujue smiled faintly. Bacchen was able to turn the situation around. It can be seen that he's a blessed person. We don't have to worry too much. Under normal circumstances, the curse physique was almost untreatable in the outside world. This was because this physique was simply too rare. Even if it appeared in the outside world, no one would know that it was because of the physique. However, under such circumstances, D. Bachen's wife was a godly doctor and even changed his physique. This kind of luck, no matter who it was, would probably sigh. The young master's fortune fills the heavens. Then let's wait for his return. A smile appeared on D. Lao's face. Although he did not see D. Bacchen, he still put down the big stone in his heart. As long as they found it, it would be something worth celebrating. What happened next was only a matter of time. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others sat down to cultivate and wait after discovering the relic. They were very calm because they had encountered relics before and knew very well that these relics had very strong restrictions. Even though their current cultivation wasn't weak, the ruins in front of them couldn't be compared to those ruins in the past. Therefore, it was better to wait here quietly for the restriction to disappear. However, although they were aware of this, the other cultivators were not necessarily aware of this. After all, the frequency of the relic appearing was very low. Many cultivators had never seen a relic before and did not know anything about it. Under such circumstances, many cultivators were eager to make a move. With such a good opportunity in front of them, anyone would want to snatch it. As long as he entered earlier, he would have a higher chance of obtaining the inheritance. Immediately, some of the cultivators began to walk towards the ruins. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown and remind, "The restriction hasn't disappeared yet, so it's meaningless for you to go there." Chapter 4032. Junior Sister Bailey, it's useless for you to persuade them. They only want to obtain the inheritance and can't wait to enter the ruins. If you say that, they might think that you're a coward and want to drag them along. Ren Ziheng's expression revealed a hint of helplessness. He had stayed in the inner hall for such a long time, so he had a certain understanding of these matters. In the face of benefits, everyone was not as rational as they usually were. They only wanted to get the treasure as soon as possible. However, other than disturbing the skeletons and sending them to their deaths, there's no point in doing so. Shangguan Yingying frowned and looked a little speechless. That's their own choice, Mo Yunjue said faintly. This kind of thing depended on one's own choice. If they were lucky, they could enter the ruins directly. That would undoubtedly be an advantage. On the contrary, it was their choice to lose their lives. Let them do what they want. We just need to take care of ourselves, Di Beichen also nodded. However, if they continue to disturb the skeleton army might discover our existence. It's very disadvantageous for our Penglai palace. Xiren's expression was solemn and a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. Whether others died or not had nothing to do with him. However, if the skeletons were to be provoked because of this, it was not something he wanted to see. Don't worry. This kind of thing is definitely not only happening in our Penglai Palace's team. There must be many cultivators from the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect who can't hold back. Di Beichen's expression was calm and there was no trace of worry on his face. Sure enough, after the Penglai Palace's cultivators began to move, the disciples from the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect in the other two directions were also eager to move. They all attacked the skeleton army. However, more cultivators chose to stay where they were and pay attention to the movements in front of them. As a group of cultivators approached the ruins from 3 directions, the skeletons that had been immersed in the light of the ruins noticed them and immediately attacked the cultivators who approached. Bang! 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 The fluctuations of the battle spread out in an instant. The cultivators from the 3 major forces and the skeleton army began to fight. As the battle became more and more intense, more and more cultivators from the 3 forces joined in. In a short period of time, a huge battlefield was formed. Both the skeletons and the cultivators were injured. Everyone wanted to pass through the army of skeletons and enter the ruins. The faint smell of blood permeated the air. Even though there were quite a number of cultivators from the 3 major forces, the number of skeletons was even greater. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest of the 9 stood in their original positions without moving. Their gazes were fixed on the battlefield as a complicated light flickered in their eyes. It seems that my previous judgment was not wrong. These skeletons will continue to replenish themselves. Her ink-black phoenix-like eyes were filled with understanding. She had thought that such a situation would happen before, and now the cultivators of the 3 major forces had made her certain of it through the battle. Cultivators from the 3 major forces kept dying. Although the number of skeletons that disappeared was greater, they were quickly replenished. Chapter 4033. Based on the current situation, even if the barrier disappears, it'll be very difficult for us to get close to the ruins. Ren Ziheng's expression was rather solemn. Based on the skeletons' behavior, they would have to pass through the skeleton army if they wanted to enter the ruins. If they could not pass through, they could only watch helplessly as the ruins lay before them. It would be useless. Looks like this is the reason why the 3 great authorities have decided to give this opportunity to us. Di Beichen muttered to himself as his eyes rippled with a thoughtful light. The skeleton army's numbers are simply too great. If there are only a few of us, we won't be able to break through the skeleton army's defense. Hence, only cultivators from the 3 great authorities can join forces to have a chance. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Indeed, We'll still have a chance when everyone joins forces. After all, many people from each organization had come. If they joined forces, they would form a huge team. As long as they attacked together, they would be able to enter the ruins once they found a breakthrough. However, it was obviously impossible to destroy all the skeletons. The only thing they could do was to seize the opportunity and rush in. If they were too slow, once the number of cultivators dwindled, they would not be able to rush in. Many cultivators have already fallen. If this continues, the situation won't be too good. Renzime could not help but comment. It's only temporary. Mo Yunjue's expression was cold. Once they find out that they won't be able to pass through, everyone will stop sending themselves to their death. There will still be quite a number of cultivators left. Yunjue is right. It won't be long before they retreat. Di Baichen chimed in. Let's wait here patiently. At that moment, only a small number of cultivators had rushed forward. Most of the cultivators were very rational and did not attack immediately. After half an hour, a cultivator finally took the opportunity to approach the barrier. His face flickered with excitement. He finally had a chance to enter the ruins. Once he entered, he would be the first cultivator to enter the ruins. He would seize the opportunity. Many cultivators at the back looked envious. It was such a good opportunity. As long as they were one step faster, they would be one step closer to success. However, when the cultivator approached the restriction, he used his strongest power to attack the restriction. Unfortunately, the restriction did not react at all. That attack didn't even leave the slightest ripple on the restriction before it dissipated into nothingness. Seeing this, the cultivator couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This situation had completely exceeded his expectations. While the cultivator was still in a daze, the skeleton soldiers behind him immediately attacked and chopped off his head without giving him a chance to say anything. Following this scene, the cultivators at the back all sobered up a little. It turned out that merely passing through the army of skeletons was of no use because it was simply impossible to break through this layer of restriction. Some of the cultivators at the back immediately chose to retreat. After the first person retreated, the other cultivators also retreated one after another. Even if they passed through the army of skeletons, it would be useless. So why should they risk their lives at this moment? Chapter 40-34. At that moment, the crowd stared at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with a complicated look in their eyes. Even though most people were convinced by Bailey Hongzhuang, that was only in the area of Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills. After all, she was still very young. Even though her cultivation has surpassed many people, no one believed that her experience would surpass theirs. Unfortunately, reality proved them that Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment was not wrong at all. They were wrong. The surroundings fell silent once again. After the cultivators had retreated, the skeleton army did not seem to have any intention of pursuing them. Instead, after the crowd had retreated from their area of influence, they stopped in their tracks and immersed themselves in the glory of the ruins as if they were on a pilgrimage. Looking at this situation, everyone felt uneasy in their hearts. Based on the skeleton army's behavior, they could tell that the ruins were a sacred place in their hearts. They wondered what the inheritance here would be like. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and began to circulate the heaven-defying technique in her body. She could faintly sense an inexplicable familiarity with the ruins in front of her. She found it hard to believe. This was the first time she had come into contact with the power of darkness ever since she had arrived at this training ground. It should have been extremely foreign to her, so why did she feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? This sense of familiarity was similar to the black stone she had received from the palace master. It had an inexplicable attraction. Could it be that black stone was also related to the power of darkness? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. That's not right. If the black stone was filled with the power of darkness, based on the palace master and the others' understanding of the power of darkness, how could they not have figured it out after such a long time? Hongzhuang, what are you thinking about? You look like you have a lot on your mind. Shangguan Yingying noticed the expression on Bailey Hongzhuang's face, and could not help but ask with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and shook her head. It's nothing, I'm just thinking that these ruins aren't as simple as they seem. I've never seen such a strange ruin before. I wonder what I'll see after entering. Could it be that this place is also filled with skeletons? Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but sigh. After all, these skeletons were inanimate objects and didn't need to eat. They only needed to be nourished by the energy of darkness. Therefore, it wasn't impossible for the skeleton army to exist in these ruins. Renzime couldn't help but shudder. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "It can't be that bad, right? Now that you mention it, I feel like this ruin is even more sinister. Everything is possible. Maybe the thing inside is even more terrifying than this skeleton army. No matter what, we have to be mentally prepared." Di Beichen's eyes darkened. Bai Tsangming's warning was definitely not groundless. Not only were there various competitions, but the ruins were also filled with danger. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others waited outside for 3 days before they saw the restriction gradually fade. Every time the ruin appeared from underground, it meant that the restriction was gradually fading away. However, it would still remain for a period of time after it emerged from the ground until the restriction was completely gone. The color of the restriction became more and more turbulent, and there were even faint ripples. When the cultivators from the 3 great organizations saw this, they couldn't help but feel elated. Chapter 40-35. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes stared at the faint, restrictive spell. She used her mental strength to sense the strength of the restrictive spell and made a judgment. "So, we're going to break into the ruins at night?" Shangguan Yingying's beautiful eyes flickered with astonishment. "At night, the skeleton army's strength is at its strongest." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said with certainty, "This might be the intention of the original owner of the ruins. The power of darkness belongs to darkness, so it's naturally different from other ruins." Ren Ziheng, Chu Jinfeng, and Ren Zimei all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in amazement. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to know so much about the ruins at such a young age. In comparison, although they had heard of the ruins, they had never seen it. So, all of their judgments about the ruins were still stuck in the books. After all, the ruins were treasures that could only be found by chance. It wasn't something that anyone would have the chance to encounter. Then we have to be prepared. We can move at any time. We have to pay close attention. Ao Lingshao said in a deep voice. This was an opportunity that was hard to come by. They had to give it their all. Night slowly fell. The restrictive spell of the ruins became fainter and fainter. It could disappear at any time. The group of skeletons still maintained their previous state as if they didn't feel the difference in the restrictive spell. This time, no one acted recklessly. After suffering the loss last time, no one wanted to do it again. After all, they were surrounded by skeletons. If they couldn't break into the restrictive spell at the first moment, it would be very uncomfortable to stay in the encirclement. Finally, under everyone's waiting, the restrictive spell completely disappeared. The moment the restrictive spell disappeared, the atmosphere seemed to freeze for a moment. Then, everyone started to charge at the fastest speed possible. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others didn't delay and rushed towards the ruins. They knew very well that they had the highest chance of breaking through when there were more people. Once they fell behind, it would be very difficult to break through the endless skeleton army. Origin energy surged in all the cultivators' bodies at the same time. The energy in the air was attracted by such a huge force and became chaotic. With so many people using martial skills at the same time, it was truly an extremely terrifying scene. When the skeleton army saw the cultivators of the 3 major forces charging forward, they immediately began to meet the enemy. It was obvious that they were guarding the ruins to the death, not allowing anyone to enter. A great battle broke out in an instant. The practitioners and the skeletons intertwined with each other and dispersed the ink-like darkness. Countless martial techniques were unleashed one after another. With blinding light and unparalleled power, they swept across the entire area. The skeleton army was annihilated at an extremely fast speed, but it was replenished at an even faster speed. The skeleton soldiers organized the skeleton army. Even though they no longer had any signs of life, this martial technique was still filled with tyrannical power when used by them. This was a battle between humans and skeletons, and it was a battle that erupted in an instant. A cool breeze blew by, carrying with it a faint smell of blood and killing intent. Everyone was doing their best to advance. At this moment, all the cultivators only had one goal, and that was to destroy the obstacles in front of them and enter the ruins. Chapter 40-36. We have to maintain our formation. We can't be separated. Bachin reminded everyone, we don't know what we'll encounter after entering the ruins. It's safest to enter as a group. Everyone nodded. Although they had yet to enter the ruins, they could already foresee the risk. Every time they pursued the inheritance, they would encounter various tests. Once they failed the test, it was very likely that they would be injured or even die. However, wealth came from danger. Since they wanted to obtain the inheritance, they had to fight for it. Under such circumstances, the only thing they could do was to move as a group. At least that would increase their safety. The strength of these skeletons is a little abnormal. They're much stronger than the skeletons we've encountered before. Even the combat power of ordinary skeletons can't be underestimated. Renzime's face was a little ugly. After exchanging blows with the skeletons, she felt a strong pressure. Even with her strength, it was very difficult to deal with it. These skeletons have evolved under the nourishment of the power of the ruins. Their combat power has greatly increased. They can't be compared to before, so everyone must be careful. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was a little solemn. The skeleton army had evolved because of the ruins. The skeleton army had stayed here for such a long time, so it was expected that they would have such an evolution. However, this also made it very difficult for them to approach the ruins. It was definitely not easy to get close. Bachin, Mo Yunjue, and Bailey Hongzhuang were the strongest cultivators in the team. Therefore, the three of them walked at the front and constantly used their powerful martial skills to open up the path for everyone. Ziren and the others followed closely behind. However, they did not dare to be negligent. They also attacked wave after wave, maintaining their vigilance and safety. It was a completely chaotic battle. There were cultivators and skeletons everywhere. They even had to be extra careful when fighting because the slightest carelessness could cause them to accidentally injure other cultivators. After all, at their level of cultivation, the destructive power of a single martial skill would be enormous, and the area of effect would be similarly vast. The two sides continued to exchange blows. The stronger cultivators could be said to be attacking all the way, while the weaker cultivators tried to follow behind these strong cultivators and take advantage of the moment when everyone was not paying attention to them to sneak in. All of a sudden, it could be said that everyone displayed their skills. As long as it was effective, they used all of them. Boom! Boom! Earth-shaking shockwaves continued to spread out, and the entire ground seemed to begin to tremble. The ground cracked inch by inch, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared. Such a scene was truly shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang's group continued to move forward. There were many skeletons in the army, so their speed was not considered slow. However, when they were halfway there, a team suddenly blocked their path. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others frowned. They could tell from the other party's robes that he was a member of the Crimson Moon sect. However, they clearly did not recognize him. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others wanted to go around them and continue moving forward. However, the other party blocked their path once again. Instantly, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but narrow her eyes and stare at the other party in an unfriendly manner. "What are you doing?" Chapter 40-37. I heard that. You've killed Li Yunyu? The leader of the group glared at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with an unfriendly look on his face. His voice was filled with menace and coldness. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, who were initially confused, immediately understood what was going on when they heard the man's words. They were here for Li Yunyu. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen looked at each other. If this had been any other day, they would have admitted to it directly. However, at a time like this, they could tell that the other party was a troublesome person. If they admitted to it, they might end up having to fight here. At a time like this, they really did not have the luxury of time to do so. With just one look, they had reached a tacit understanding. "I don't know what you're talking about," Di Beichen replied calmly. "If there's nothing else, we still need to enter the ruins. Don't block the way." Just as he had spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others continued to move forward. They did not intend to have any further interactions with the other party. Just then, one of the cultivators in the group spoke up. "Senior Brotherly, I saw it with my own eyes. They were the ones who had killed Li Yunyu. I'm not mistaken." The cultivator's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Previously, he had happened to pass by and had witnessed Li Yunyu's entire group being destroyed by their hands. He had initially wanted to help, but the other party was simply too powerful. Hence, he had chosen to leave. Once he had returned, he had told Li Boyo about this. Ever since then, Li Boyo had come to the training grounds to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had never appeared. Until this time, when the ruins appeared, they finally encountered it. However, he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would refuse to admit to it. Li Boyo was a well-known figure in the Crimson Moon sect. Usually, he would not be able to come into contact with him at all. It was only after he had told Li Boyo about Li Yunyu's murder that Li Boyo had allowed him to enter the circle. If Li Boyo believed that he was lying, he would not be able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect any longer. Thinking of this, his heart felt extremely gloomy. The other party had been able to kill Li Yunyu and the others. No matter how one looked at it, they were true experts. They were clearly experts, but they refused to admit it at a time like this. What were they thinking? What? You don't dare to admit it? Li Boyo looked at Di Beichen coldly. "I have people here who said that they saw you kill Li Yunyu. It's true that there's a lot of trouble when you're popular. Are you here to pick a fight?" Shangguan Yingying took a step forward, her face cold. "He said he saw it, so he saw it? If we say that we didn't kill him, why don't you believe us? Let me tell you, Hongzhuang is famous now. Many people want to get close to her, but there are also many people who want to cause trouble for her." We? Hearing Shangguan Yingying's words, Li Boyo and the others could not help but feel shocked. Initially, he had not believed Shangguan Yingying's words. However, Shangguan Yingying had suddenly said so much. He suddenly felt that Shangguan Yingying was not the type to lie. Could it be that he had made a mistake? Chapter 4038. Not to mention Li Boyo, even Rin Ziheng and the rest were stunned by Shangguan Yingying's words. If they had not been involved in this matter, and clearly knew that Li Yunyu had died in their hands, they would have thought that this had nothing to do with them after hearing Shangguan Yingying's words. Master, Yingying is becoming more and more powerful. Her ability to lie without thinking is almost on par with Ziren. Xiao Hei's eyes were filled with surprise and admiration. In the past, she had thought that Yingying was a little impulsive. Now, Yingying was becoming more and more intelligent. It's all thanks to Ziren's good teachings. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but laugh. In a short period of time, Shangguan Yingying's improvement was really shocking. Her words were enough to confuse the other party. While the other party was still confused, Di Beichen immediately threw out a sentence. "If you want to cause trouble for us, we welcome you. However, we have urgent matters to attend to now, and we don't have the time." After speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest immediately left. "Senior Brotherly, I really didn't lie to you. I saw them kill Li Yunyu with my own eyes. However, I didn't expect them to lie. Qing Jianqing was so depressed that he was about to die. He had clearly told the truth, but judging from the situation, it was obvious that no one believed him. Li Boyo fell into silence and did not answer immediately. Instead, he said, "Forget it, we'll talk about this later. Let's enter the ruins first." After saying this, the cultivators behind him nodded. At this time, entering the ruins was the most important thing. Qing Jianqing followed behind Li Boyo, but his heart had quietly sunk. If Li Boyo did not believe him, he would not be able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect in the future. This was not a situation that he wanted to see. If he had known earlier, he would not have told Li Boyo about this. At least he would have been able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect peacefully. "Yingying, you're becoming more and more intelligent," Bailey Hongzhuang praised. Hearing this, the smile on Shangguan Yingying's face widened. "I had a sudden inspiration. Fortunately, the effect is not bad." Senior Brother Ren, do you know who this person is?" Di Beichen looked at Ren Ziheng. He did not know much about the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect. Clearly, Ren Ziheng knew more about them than they did. Ren Ziheng nodded. "This person is Li Yunyo's older brother, named Li Boyo. The reason why Li Yunyu could have such a status and reputation in the Crimson Moon sect was because of his brother, Li Boyo. Li Boyo was a true expert of the Crimson Moon sect. He was powerful and righteous. Hence, he had a resounding reputation in the Crimson Moon sect. There were many cultivators who followed him. I thought that no one would know that we killed Li Yunyu, so I didn't take it to heart. But I didn't expect that someone would see this scene. This matter has become much more complicated. Is this Li Boyo very strong?" Mo Yunjue's eyes were deep, his voice cold. "That's right. It's said that his cultivation has already surpassed the 5th level of the astral radiance realm. It can be said that he's extremely powerful. Normally, no one is willing to offend him." Chapter 4039. Listening to Ren Ziheng's introduction to Li Boyo, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' hearts sank a little. Star Radiance Stage 5, this kind of strength was indeed extremely tyrannical. Even in Penglai Palace, cultivators with this kind of strength were first-class powerhouses. Most importantly, when Li Boyo and the others came over just now, they had already noticed that the size of the other party's team was really not ordinary. If Li Boyo found trouble with them now, then it would really cause them a lot of trouble. Then we'd better enter the ruins as soon as possible. It's best to get rid of Li Boyo as soon as possible. Otherwise, with this guy here, we really have no fate with the ruins. When Xiren couldn't help but say. With such a great opportunity in front of them, they couldn't miss it just like that. Even if they really couldn't avoid it in the future, they would have to solve it in the future. At this time, they couldn't afford any delay. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. Li Boyo is also very confused now. For a while, he still can't judge whether what we said is true or false, so we still have a chance. But once he comes back to his senses, I'm afraid it won't be so simple. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two quietly looked at each other. They didn't have any wishful thinking in their hearts. The mentality of a powerhouse was that they would rather kill by mistake than let go. Since that was the case, as long as there was a slight possibility, the other party would kill them to avenge Li Yunyu. This didn't affect everyone's speed. Under the charge of a group of cultivators, they quickly passed through the obstruction of the skeleton army and continued to approach the ruins. Li Boyo's strength was extremely tyrannical. In addition to the size of his team, when the combat power fully erupted, it could be said that they were the fastest team. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also pulled away from them as they moved forward. Bang bang bang! Under the collision of countless energy, Li Boyo and the others were the first to approach the ruins. The restriction had long disappeared, so they walked directly to the entrance of the ruins without any obstruction. Noticing this scene, a touch of envy suddenly appeared in the eyes of the cultivators who were still fighting. The other party had already seized the opportunity, and the chances of obtaining the treasure would be higher. Li Boyo and the others stood in front of the door and were somewhat hesitant. After all, no one knew what kind of situation they would encounter after opening this door. Finally, they pushed open the black door. Rumble! The heavy sound of the door opening rang out. Li Boyo and the others all retreated a distance, guarding against any possible attacks that might appear in the ruins. However, after the door opened, there was no movement at all. Seeing this, Li Boyo and the others couldn't help but look at each other before walking inside together. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not slow either. Not long after Li Boyo and the others entered, they also entered the ruins. With the other party leading the way, they naturally didn't have to worry about any traps near the door. They immediately walked in. Darkness. It was still boundless darkness. Not only was the exterior of the building black, even the interior was black. The black bricks and the black totem emitted a demonic darkness and mystery. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also had a trace of seriousness and nervousness on their faces. Chapter 40. Damn, isn't this building a little too strange? I can feel the hairs on my body standing on end. Chu Jinfeng rubbed his hands together and shook his body. As soon as he walked in, he felt a cold breeze blow past him. It felt as if he had walked into a haunted house. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, the others could not help but shrink their necks. In fact, their feelings were exactly the same as Chu Jinfeng's. This ruin is strange indeed. The ruins that we've seen in the past were all very bright. It's nothing like this ruin. It's pitch black and makes one's heart flutter. Xiao He could not help but mutter. This eerie feeling really made one's scalp go numb. The power of darkness itself is black. If it were a bright ruin, it would be unbelievable. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly spoke up as her eyes scanned her surroundings vigilantly. Ever since she found out that this ruin was related to the power of darkness, she felt that this ruin should not be underestimated. Now that she had entered, her feeling became even more profound. Therefore, she paid attention to every step she took to prevent herself from falling into a trap. Di Beichen took out a luminous pearl and illuminated the path in front of everyone. After taking a look, everyone realized that there was a path with no end in front of them. It was deep and pitch black as if there was no end to it. Wow, this path is so long. It's really eerie. Ziren could not help but sigh. When one was walking in the darker it was, the longer the path felt. I remember that we entered the ruin not much later than Li Boyo and the others. Why haven't we seen any traces of them? Renzime looked in front of her. The path was pitch black, and they could not hear any sound at all. It was really strange. As soon as she said that, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but look at each other. Their expressions became complicated. Indeed, according to what we've seen, this path is very long. The other party did not enter this path much earlier than us either. We should have been able to hear their movements. However, ever since we entered, it seems that only our voices could be heard. Regardless of whether it's the front or the back, we couldn't hear anything at all. This is rather strange. Mo Yunjue's deep and enchanting eyes flashed with the light of contemplation. The situation in front of him was indeed not right. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but stop in her tracks. If Li Boyo and the others moved very quickly and left us far behind in a short period of time, that is not impossible. However, this matter is indeed a little strange. Why don't we wait here for a while and see if there will be any cultivators behind us? This is the only way to judge this matter now. Di Beichen nodded. Let's wait for a while. After making this decision, Ren Ziheng and the others did not object. They just stayed where they were. However, after waiting for a while, they still did not hear the slightest movement. Everyone understood. Looks like we're the only ones here. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was firm. Logically speaking, the cultivators should be entering the ruins one after another. It was impossible for them to not hear anything after waiting for a while. Chapter 40-41. What do you mean? Renzime looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in confusion. Seeing that they had a tacit understanding, she was confused. Are you saying that we're the only ones here? That's impossible. Everyone had entered the ruins, so how could they be the only ones here? Looking at Renzime's confused look, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but smile. Senior Sister Ren, we should have entered the small world set up by the owner of the ruins. There are actually many cultivators around us, but we can't see them. I see. Only then did Renzime understand. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She was clearly the senior sister, but she knew less than her junior sister. Junior Sister Bailey, you know a lot of things. I'm really ashamed. Senior Sister Ren, don't belittle yourself. We just happen to know because we've seen it before. What should we do now? Renziheng's eyes darkened. He did not have much experience in ruins. Now that he knew the situation, what should they do next? We have to find a way out of here, Di Beichen said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around and knocked on the ground and walls around them. She did not find anything special and could not help but say, "There's nothing around here. Why don't we continue to move forward and see if we can find anything?" Okay. Because they had discovered this very early, they did not have to move forward for long. Therefore, they could only continue to move forward and see if they could find anything. After making this decision, everyone continued to move forward. However, they did not move as quickly as before. They only paid attention to the situation around them as they walked. However, after walking for a long time, they did not find anything. Everyone could not help but frown. At the same time, Li Boyo and the others who had entered the ruins were in the same situation. They were confused by the scene in front of them and could not find a breakthrough at all. Why is it like this? Li Boyo stopped in his tracks. Based on what they had seen before, the ruins were indeed huge. However, they had been walking for so long that they had long exceeded the range of what they could see. Senior Brotherly, something is wrong with the situation, the cultivator behind him also said. Let's stop and think about it. This situation is a little different from what we thought. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others slowed down and carefully observed their surroundings. This situation is really strange. It seems that there's no use for us to continue walking. Mo Yunjua said. Let's stop and think about the situation around us. There must be some places that we have not found. Di Beichen looked at everyone and suggested. Everyone nodded. They had been walking for so long and they had not found anything. By now, there was no point to continue walking. Since that was the case, it was better to think about where the problem was. Otherwise, it would be useless to just waste his energy. For a time, everyone stopped where they were and looked at the walls around them. However, the walls were all paved with black bricks, and he couldn't see any difference at all. Chapter 40-42. However, no matter how hard Bailey Hongzhuang knocked on the surrounding bricks, she did not notice any difference. This place is so strange. We've been searching for so long, but why haven't we found anything? Shangguan Yingying looked puzzled. She had always heard that there were various unexpected situations in the ruins, but there should be traces to follow. The situation in front of them was completely baffling, and they did not know where to start. It's indeed a little strange. Xiren nodded. There's nothing here except for the walls. Moreover, there's nothing special about the walls. Where are we going to find a way to crack it? This is my first time entering the ruins, so I can't give any good suggestions. Renziheng frowned. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had not discovered that this was a small world, he did not know how long it would have taken him to figure it out. He was completely baffled by the current situation and had absolutely no idea what to do. Everyone, please calm down. Since the owner of the ruins has set up all of this, there must be a way to crack it. If you want to obtain the treasures in the ruins, you must pay a price. Let's search carefully. Maybe we'll miss some details. Di Beichen calmed everyone's emotions. The more confused they were, the easier it was for them to become anxious. Once they became anxious, it would be even more difficult to find anything. Therefore, they must first suppress this negative emotion. Only by calming down would they be able to find something. Hearing Di Beichen's words, Ren Ziheng and the others nodded. The anxiety in their eyes quietly dissipated. Everyone began to check their surroundings patiently. Bailey Hongzhuang felt the wall in front of her with both hands. There were only these things here. Presumably, they would have to start from this wall. After carefully feeling around, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly said, "Beichen, there seems to be a small sunken spot on this wall." Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone could not help but come closer. They looked curiously at the spot that Bailey Hongzhuang was pointing at. After taking a closer look, everyone's faces were full of surprise. Indeed, there is a sunken spot here. The sunken spot was very small. If they did not reach out to feel it carefully, it was very likely that they would have missed it. But this spot is not a mechanism. What does a sunken spot mean? Ao Lingxiao's eyes were full of thoughts. Although there was a trace of discovery, what was the use of it? At this moment, Shangguan Yingying's voice rang out. "I found a spot here too." "Yes, there is one here too," Ren Zimei followed. After discovering these small dots one after another, everyone ruled out the possibility that they were accidental. Even if the stone was slightly damaged, it was impossible for several small dots to appear in one area. It was very likely that the key lay in these small dots. The next moment, Mo Yunjue took out some fluorescent powder from his Qiankuan bag and sprinkled it on the small dot. The small dot became bright in the darkness. "Let's find these dots and see if they can give us any hints," Mo Yunjue said. Chapter 40-43. Small dots were discovered one after another, and everyone used fluorescent powder to mark these small dots. In the end, everyone realized that the number of dots was not small. It was not until the last dot was marked out that they realized that the glowing dots were like fireflies all around them. "There are no more dots. We've found all of them," Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Shangguan Yingying immediately sat on the ground and looked at the dots on the three walls. Her eyes were filled with amazement. "Hongzhuang, you're really amazing. You're so careful that you can even find these dots. If it were me, I'm afraid that I would only think that these are traces left behind by the erosion of time." Ren Zimei nodded repeatedly. Yes, who would have thought that these dots would be the key to solving the mystery? Ordinary people would overlook them. Fortunately, I came with you. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I would have to stay in this dark path forever and never be able to get out. I just have some experience and know that I can't overlook anything. That's why I was able to find them. Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferent. After exploring the ruins several times, she already understood that many details that people usually overlook were often the key to solving the mystery. Perhaps every owner of the ruins would have this idea, so her observation was especially meticulous. However, these dots look disorderly. I don't know what they mean. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her head and looked at the flickering dots around her. Her pretty face was filled with confusion. These disorderly dots could not give them any hints at all. If she was not sure that there were so many dots around her, she would not even think that these were hints at all. Observe carefully. Maybe there is some pattern in these dots that we haven't found yet. Di Beichen held Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand. It's already very amazing that you can find the existence of these dots. Hearing Di Beichen's gentle and doting words, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart warmed and the corners of her lips could not help but curl up slightly. As long as Di Beichen was by her side, she would feel extremely at ease. Next, everyone began to stare at these dots. However, the existence of these dots was too messy, and they couldn't make any connections at all. I only feel countless fireflies flying around in front of me. They're making me dizzy. Chu Jinfeng could not help but rub his head with both hands. He felt that his brain was a mess and he could not understand the meaning of these things. Who knows what these things are for? I don't understand at all. Ren Zimei also looked frustrated. This kind of thing was too brain-draining. She thought of everything she could think of, but she still couldn't find anything. Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but look at Wenziren. Seeing that Wenziren and the others were still staring at these dots with serious expressions, she dismissed the idea of speaking. If it were them, they would not be able to find any clues. Time gradually passed. In this silent darkness, no one knew how much time had passed. But according to their judgment, it was probably 3 days. Chapter 40-44. Master, have you discovered anything? Xiaohei rubbed her stiff neck. Her round little face was filled with confusion and helplessness. I've been looking at it for so long that my neck is sore, but I haven't discovered anything special. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. Her bright moon-like eyes were also filled with confusion and bewilderment. The arrangement of these little dots is just too strange. No matter how I look at it, I can't connect them together. Even the 8 diagrams don't seem to have such an arrangement. On the contrary, I feel that it looks like we're looking at a sky full of stars. These little dots are just like the arrangement of the stars. They're very random and untraceable. In the past 3 days, she had thought of everything that she could think of. However, the result still made her feel extremely helpless. Wife, what did you just say? Di Beichen suddenly turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. His dark and deep eyes were shining brightly. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. I said that these arrangements are untraceable. That's not right. Di Beichen shook his head. His expression was full of seriousness. There's another sentence before that. These little dots are just like the arrangement of the stars. They're untraceable. Bailey Hongzhuang thought about what she had said before. It seemed to be this sentence. Di Beichen's eyes lit up. He clasped his hands together and his voice was filled with surprise. That's right. That's the sentence? What does that mean? Shangguan Yingying could not help but look at Di Beichen. In fact, she felt the same as Hongzhuang. They both felt as if they were looking at the stars. However, what was the problem? I vaguely feel that we've imagined the arrangement of these little dots to be too complicated. Perhaps these little dots were not arranged according to any special pattern at all. They were just casually arranged by the owner of the ruins. Stars. Perhaps this is the sky full of stars. After saying this, Di Beichen seemed to have opened up a new train of thought. His deep and bright eyes once again looked at the stars and fell into deep thought. Looking at this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Looking at the situation, it was obvious that Di Beichen already had an idea. Perhaps Beichen is right. We've been trying to figure out what kind of pattern these little dots follow. Perhaps these little dots don't have any pattern at all, and were just randomly created by the owner of the ruins. Perhaps if we think about it in another direction, we'll gain something unexpected, Mo Yunjue pondered and said. In fact, he had also been observing for 3 whole days without finding anything. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Right now, she really couldn't find any pattern. Vaguely, she also felt that Di Beichen's judgment was right. Most importantly, she saw confidence on Di Beichen's face. Every time Di Beichen revealed such an expression, it meant that he had found something. She believed that Di Beichen would definitely find a way to solve this problem. Everyone only saw that Di Beichen had been staring at the starry sky. There was no longer a blank look on his face. On the contrary, there was a hint of confidence in his heart. Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other. They had not found anything so far. Even after listening to the conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they still could not figure out where the breakthrough was. Chapter 40-45. Di Beichen and the others looked as if they had been enlightened, but they had been confused ever since they came in. They were clearly senior brothers, but it was Di Beichen and the others who had been leading the way. On the contrary, they seemed to have not discovered anything since they came here. This was too frustrating. Normally, Renzime would never admit it if others said this to her. However, after seeing this scene, she had no choice but to admit it. No wonder Di Baichen and the others could improve their cultivation so quickly. This level of understanding was much stronger than theirs. Fortunately, we came in with junior brother D and the others. Otherwise, just thinking about it would be enough for us to bear. Chu Jinfeng shrugged. In the past, he had always hoped to have the opportunity to explore the ruins. Now, it seemed that he was lucky that he had not encountered the ruins before. Otherwise, he would have lost his life. Time passed by slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang also tried to observe these small dots, using the method Di Baichen had mentioned. As she entered a meditative state, she had a different feeling than before. She felt as if she was in the middle of a galaxy. A strange and mysterious feeling surrounded her, containing the complicated laws of heaven and earth. Di Baichen's gaze focused on these small dots. However, his gaze had already penetrated these small dots and looked deeper. Countless stars floated in front of his eyes. Finally, they dissipated one by one. All the stars were connected and finally merged into one point. That's right. That's it. Di Baichen's voice suddenly rang out, startling Wenziren and the others who were deep in thought. Everyone looked at Di Baichen. Could it be that Di Baichen had discovered the mystery of this place? Bailey Hongzhuang was immersed in the countless stars. She only felt that the originally extremely complicated stars were dissipating bit by bit. The pattern was becoming simpler and simpler, however, just as Di Baichen's voice fell, the light dots in front of everyone's eyes suddenly dissipated. Then, the scene in front of them changed. In their line of sight, the originally deep and dark path had disappeared. A large hall appeared in front of everyone. Obviously, they had left the small world from before. Bailey Hongzhuang also opened her eyes. Looking at the scene in front of her, her eyes were filled with faint joy. I see. She had also discovered some clues to the solution. However, Di Baichen's solution speed was much faster than hers. Therefore, he had led them out of the small world first. Di Baichen's lips curled into a faint smile. Looks like my wife has also discovered the solution. Not as fast as you. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled brightly. Baichen's perception was very strong, so she was also very happy. If my wife hadn't reminded me, I'm afraid I don't know when I would have figured this out. Di Baichen's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became increasingly gentle. Previously, all of them had fallen into a misconception. If Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't mentioned this point, they probably wouldn't have been able to wake up from the previous scene. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I just couldn't figure it out. That's why I had no choice but to use this analogy. You were the one who discovered it first. You two don't have to be modest with each other. You two are the best. As expected of husband and wife. Chapter 40-46. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen could not help but smile at each other. Indeed, they were the most compatible. There's a large hall in front. Why don't we go and take a look? Bailey Hongzhuang suggested. Everyone nodded. Everyone wanted to know what kind of treasures were in the ruins. The sooner they arrived, the higher their chances of obtaining them. I think our speed is already considered fast. I'm afraid there aren't many people faster than us. Wenziren's face rippled with a thoughtful light. Their speed was definitely not slow. After all, they had discovered that they had entered the small world not long after entering. Although it took some time to find the small dot, it was definitely not slow overall. In addition, Di Baichen's comprehension was already very high, but he still took such a long time. Presumably, the others would not be much faster. That's right. Maybe we've already seized the opportunity. Ren Ziheng agreed. Let's go and take a look. There might be treasures in the large hall. In the next moment, everyone quickened their pace and walked forward. However, although they were fast, they did not let their guard down. After all, no one knew if there would be unknown dangers here. If they were to fall into danger because of a moment of carelessness, it would be terrible. Fortunately, it was safe all the way. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others successfully walked into the large hall. However, when they arrived at the large hall, they found that it was empty. There was nothing inside. Seeing this, everyone could not help but feel puzzled. They thought that they would find some treasures after breaking out of the small world. They did not expect to find nothing. Could it be that we're late and the treasures here have already been taken away? Renzime could not help but ask. There shouldn't be nothing in such a big place. If that's the case, then only the most famous experts in the three forces can do this. Renziheng's face was somewhat emotional. I just hope it's not Li Boyo and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. It was still the same black wall tiles. However, there was a faint trace of gold on these wall tiles, revealing a bit of magnificence and nobility. It seemed that the owner of this ruin was also a wealthy person, because she could see that the golden color on the bricks was the real gold. Using gold to decorate these bricks and decorating them in such a low-key manner, it could be seen that the craftsman's taste was not bad. This place is so strange. Shangguan Yingying looked around and saw the surroundings clearly. She couldn't help but say, the path we took leads to this hall and there's no other path. Could it be that we've walked into a dead end? Impossible. After hearing Shangguan Yingying's guess, Di Beichen had already made his judgment. This is definitely not a dead end. I'm afraid there's something fishy going on here. Mo Yunjua nodded. Looks like the owner of this ruin really likes to set up checkpoints. Up until now, we haven't seen anything, but we have to keep breaking through them. It's probably a hobby of the owner of the ruins. Ao Lingxiao spread out his hands. The characteristics of the ruins indicated the personality of the owner of the ruins. The ruins were completely created by him, so the layout of the ruins was naturally up to him. Chapter 40-47. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. That means that the way to find the next path should be in this grand hall. Everyone, look carefully and see if there are any special places. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the crowd did not delay any longer and started to search. After the first experience, everyone was no longer as lost as before. On the contrary, everyone was able to calm down and pay attention to their surroundings. Even such a small dot could be the key to passing the stage, then they had to be extremely careful. However, at this moment, Mo Yunjua pointed to a protruding rock in front of the grand hall and said, "Do you guys think the switch should not be this rock, right?" Once this was said, everyone's gaze fell onto the rock. Indeed, that rock was clearly protruding. Although at first glance it was impossible to discover its existence, but after a closer look, one would be able to discover it. If it's this, isn't it a little too simple? Shangguan Yingying could not help but scratch her head. According to the previous experience, passing the stage should be extremely complicated. If it was such an obvious mechanism, then it felt a little different from what they had imagined. Everyone looked at each other and were momentarily unable to make up their minds. Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the front of the mechanism and after examining it carefully, she could not help but say, "This mechanism is really too obvious. Could it be that it is not a mechanism to pass the stage, but a dangerous mechanism?" Everyone fell into silence. Bailey Hongzhuang said the same thing that they were thinking about. This was indeed very possible. With such an obvious mechanism, anyone who looked carefully would be able to notice it. Compared to the previous situation, this was really too simple. Why don't we first look around to see if there are any other mechanisms? If we don't find any, then we can try this mechanism. What do you guys think? Di Beichen suggested. All right. Everyone agreed. This was the most reliable method. Following this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest of the 9 people started to search around. However, no matter how they searched, they did not find anything. In the end, everyone's gaze locked onto the obvious mechanism. Looks like we can only try this mechanism, Mo Yunjua said calmly. Then let's give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Everyone has to be extra careful. Problems can happen at any time. A solemn expression appeared on everyone's faces. After Mo Yunjue pressed the mechanism, everyone carefully paid attention to their surroundings, wary of any unforeseen events that might occur. Ka ka ka. All they heard was the sound of a mechanism turning. Immediately after, everyone was surprised to find that a large door had opened on their right. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. It can't be? Is this mechanism really that simple? Shangguan Ying couldn't help but be speechless. I'm starting to wonder if there are two masters in this ruin. Their styles are just too different. Chu Jinfeng shrugged, but he couldn't help but smile. After all, he had found the next path. Ren Ziheng also relaxed a little. No matter what, as long as we know what to do next, it's good. Chapter 40-48. This was because there was an army of skeletons behind the door. Heavens, what's going on? How could there be so many skeletons? Shangguan Ying cried out in surprise as her face sank. At a rough glance, the skeletons in front of them numbered in the thousands. Compared to the 9 of them, the disparity was too great. I take back what I've said earlier. There must be only one owner in this ruin, and the owner of this ruin must be very abnormal. Chu Jinfeng stared blankly at the same spot. In his line of sight was another enormous hall. This hall was 10 times bigger than the hall they were in. An army of over 1,000 skeletons was gathered there, forming a black mass. This feeling was simply suffocating. Ao Lingxiao couldn't help but swallow his saliva. This scene was indeed a little shocking. At that moment, he even felt that his mind was in a complete mess. He couldn't think of what to do next. Could it be that the mechanism really isn't a mechanism to pass the trial, but a dangerous mechanism? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. Although the scene in front of her was extremely shocking, she still managed to calm down. After all, there was no use in being anxious at this time. If they had found the wrong mechanism, then they must find the right mechanism in order to have any hope of leaving this place. Otherwise, when faced with this army of over 1,000 skeletons, they would be exhausted to death by taking turns to fight them. Look, there's a passageway on the right side of the hall opposite us. Mo Yunjue's sharp eyes noticed the situation in the hall and immediately pointed it out. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest looked in the direction Mo Yunjue was pointing at. Indeed, as he had said, there was a passageway there. This means that this army of skeletons in front of us is very likely to be a test for us. Only after passing through this army of skeletons can we reach the rear, Di Beichen said in a low voice. There are so many skeletons. With just the 9 of us, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. Ziren frowned. If a large group of cultivators had appeared together to deal with these skeletons, it would be possible for them to pass the trial. However, there were only 9 of them. Even if their abilities were not bad, it was almost impossible for them to pass through this situation. At that moment, everyone's hearts sank. This was simply an impossible task. The skeleton army didn't give Bailey Hongzhuang and the others any time to think. They immediately rushed towards them. The sound of heavy and orderly footsteps could be heard. All the skeletons seemed to treat them as intruders. Their eyes flickered with a demonic glint, and they only wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. What should we do? Renzime couldn't help but exclaim. Looking at the skeleton army that was constantly rushing over, she felt an indescribable pressure. There's no other way. We can only give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. It wasn't easy for him to get here, so he definitely couldn't give up just like that. She believed that since the owner of the ruins had made such an arrangement, there must be a possibility of breaking through. Otherwise, the ruins would be dead and useless. Let's give it a try, Di Beichen said. After seeing how determined Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen were, everyone gave up on the idea of running away. Chapter 40-49. In the next moment, vigorous primary energy exploded from everyone's bodies as their contracted beasts came out to help in the battle. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest faced the incoming skeleton army with burning fighting spirit in their eyes as they fully unleashed their strongest combat power. Bang! Bang bang bang! One after another, martial arts techniques were unleashed from Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest. However, when they unleashed their martial arts techniques, everyone restrained themselves. This was because they were in the ruins and not in the outside world. If the destructive power of their martial arts techniques was too great, it was very likely that they would directly destroy the ruins. If the ruins were turned into ruins, then they would naturally be buried here. This undoubtedly caused everyone to be somewhat restrained. Bailey Hongzhuang took out her nine-tailed zither as her pitch-black phoenix eyes flickered with a bright luster. I'll try to use sound waves to attack in a straight line. Our goal is not to destroy all these skeletons, but to head to the passage over there. Bailey Hongzhuang's suggestion undoubtedly brought a glimmer of hope to everyone, and they immediately nodded. All right. This was the only way that had the highest success rate at the moment. Otherwise, it would be too difficult to pass through so many skeletons. The sound of the zither poured out from Bailey Hongzhuang's 5 fingers. The pleasant sound of the zither was a nightmare to the skeletons. However, after exchanging blows, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest realized that these skeletons were much stronger than the skeletons they had encountered outside. These skeletons are too strong. With my strength, I can't break through at all. Shangguan Yingying's pretty face could not help but reveal a trace of panic. Originally, when she faced skeletons in the training grounds, although they were not considered to be extremely strong, at least she had no problem dealing with them. Previously, when she was outside the ruins, she had already felt a great increase in pressure. However, she now realized that the skeletons in the ruins were much stronger than before. Facing skeletons of such strength, it was simply a problem for her to persevere. When Ziren stood beside Shangguan Yingying, the two of them had to join forces to resist the skeleton's attack. However, this was only a temporary defense. It was simply too difficult to pass through all of this under such circumstances. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but walk over to Shangguan Yingying's side. At the same time, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue also went to help Chu Jinfeng and the others. They were all at the Astral Radiance realm, so they could still put up a fight against these skeletons. However, cultivators below the Astral Radiance realm would have a hard time dealing with these skeletons. The skeletons outside have only been nourished outside the ruins for a period of time, and their strength has increased so much. These skeletons have been staying in the ruins for who knows how many years. Naturally, their strength is extraordinary. Di Beichen's expression was solemn. Based on the current situation, they only had one path, but this path was so difficult that it was difficult to choose. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang finally understood why Ao Lingxiao had said that to enter the upper realm, one had to be at the Astral Radiance realm or above. Otherwise, those below the Astral Radiance realm would not be able to pass through the group of skeletons. Thinking about it, the skeletons in the upper realm were about the same as the skeletons in front of them. Let's try our best to charge through. If we really can't, we'll give up. Chapter 40-50. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was very interested in the inheritance of the ruins, they had to consider the big picture. Apart from the 3 of them who had already broken through to the Starlight realm, the others obviously felt a huge pressure. In comparison, they would rather not enter the ruins and have everyone be safe. After all, they were a team, and no one was willing to see their teammates get injured because they were risking their lives. Di Beichen nodded, okay. Compared to the lives of Ziren and the others, the inheritance was not that important. Mo Yunjue did not speak. To him, this kind of thing was not within the scope of his consideration. In fact, he, who grew up in the heavenly slaughter tower, did not have such emotions. The most important thing was his own interest. Giving up his own interests for the sake of everyone was undoubtedly an extremely stupid move to him. However, the only one he cared about was Bailey Hongzhuang. No matter what decision Bailey Hongzhuang made, he had no objections. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others make such a decision, Ziren and the others felt even more pressure in their hearts. No one would be willing to give up such a good opportunity. However, just because they were holding back, They had implicated Bailey Hongzhuang and the others to give up as well. They felt that they had let down Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. In the next moment, Shangguan Yingying and Wen Ziren could not help but look at each other, and then nodded affirmatively. Then, the two of them displayed their strongest martial skills together. Bang! An astonishing wave spread out, causing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others who were fighting to turn their gazes away. Their eyes flashed with astonishment. They did not expect Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying to be able to burst out with such an attack. After the two of them displayed their joint martial skill, an incomparably tyrannical force appeared. Then, the skeletons in the line in front of them turned into powder. "Quick! Let's move forward!" Ziren hurriedly said. Right now, the only thing they could do was to seize this opportunity and move forward quickly. After opening up a gap, they would quickly close in. Otherwise, if they were delayed, they would really have no strength left. Even though everyone was shocked by the might of Ziren and Wen Xinya's combined martial skill, they knew that now was not the time to be concerned about this point. Immediately, their figures flashed and they quickly rushed into the middle of the skeleton army. As they walked into the center, the pressure from the skeletons from all directions increased. Instantly, everyone formed a circle with their backs against each other and moved forward together. From the moment they chose to break into the encirclement, they already had no way out. Just as they were moving forward with all their might, a commotion suddenly came from ahead. Rumble! One of the walls of the hall where the skeleton army was located was suddenly opened. This scene was similar to what they had experienced before. Then, a conversation not far away entered their ears. "I didn't expect that the mechanism to lead to the next place would actually be here. This is great. In my opinion, we must be the fastest team. The other cultivators' speed can't be compared to ours." "Of course. Don't you know who's leading our team?" Even the sect leader praised Senior Brother Li's comprehension. "If it wasn't for Senior Brother Li leading us, I'm afraid we wouldn't know how long we would be trapped in that damned place." Chapter 40-51. Listening to their conversation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They secretly guessed that this so-called Senior Brother Li couldn't be the Li Boyo they didn't want to see, right? If that was the case, it would be too much of a coincidence. As the door gradually opened, the appearance of the cultivator inside also appeared in the line of sight of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. It was really a small world. The person they didn't want to meet the most just happened to meet him. It can't be, right? How can it be so coincidental? We just wanted to avoid Li Boyo, and this guy just happened to meet us. Shangguan Yingying looked helpless. It wasn't easy to deceive Li Boyo before. No one knew when this Li Boyo would figure everything out and come back to his senses. If this guy suddenly figured out how to deal with them, then it would be troublesome. The heavens don't do as we wish. The heavens really don't open their eyes. Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but sigh. Looking at Shangguan Yingying and Chu Jinfeng's helpless appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. Actually, this is also expected. Li Boyo's strength is so tyrannical, it can be seen that his comprehension is also very high. Now, the cultivator teams that can break through here are all strong teams. It's normal for him to appear here. Usually, the comprehension of strong cultivators was not low. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to achieve such achievements at such a young age. Therefore, it was reasonable for Li Boyo to be able to comprehend it so quickly. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but nod. There were only a few possibilities for the cultivators to appear here. As long as they were fast enough, it could be said that it was inevitable for them to meet Li Boyo and the others. But it's good that these guys appeared. It's too much pressure for us to deal with these skeletons alone. With them here, they can naturally share some of the pressure. In a way, this guy can be considered to have helped us a little. Di Baichen said with a faint smile. Li Boyo obviously did not expect to meet Bailey Hongzhuang and the others here. Seeing them surprised him even more than seeing the group of skeletons. The faces of the cultivators who had said that Li Boyo would be the first batch to arrive turned ugly to behold. They had wanted to flatter Li Boyo. Unexpectedly, someone else had arrived before them. Their faces could not help but turn ugly to behold. Li Boyo naturally thought of this as well. His expression revealed some embarrassment, and a layer of haze quietly covered his eyes. Previously, he did not pay much attention to Bailey Hongzhuang and her team. After all, this team was not large. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was quite famous, that was only in the field of medical skills. He had never paid much attention to her strength. However, such a small team that he had overlooked had actually arrived here faster than them. This was something that he found hard to accept. Isn't this Bailey Hongzhuang and others from Penglai Palace? I didn't expect to meet him again so soon. Why are there so many skeletons? They are completely surrounded by these skeletons. The cultivators in the team quickly focused their attention on these skeletons. After all, their main purpose now was to seize the inheritance in this ruin. The most important thing was to find the next place. Chapter 40-52. At the same time, Li Boyo also sized up the situation in front of him. Since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were able to arrive here earlier than them, it proved that they were true geniuses. Their comprehension was actually stronger than his. The other party would definitely not appear there for no reason. If they wanted to escape, they would definitely have a chance. Thinking of this, Li Boyo carefully sized up his surroundings. With this observation, he suddenly realized that there was a passage behind the skeleton army. According to the position of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, it was obvious that they wanted to pass through the skeleton army and head to the passage. I see. Li Boyo suddenly understood and could not help but sigh in his heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were only 9 people. Facing the skeleton army of thousands, they actually had the courage to charge forward. Just this courage alone was amazing. If it was an ordinary team, they would probably have lost the confidence to continue fighting after seeing such a huge skeleton army. At this moment, Li Boyo also changed his previous neglect of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. For them to be able to do this, it could be said that their courage was commendable. They were really not ordinary people. Perhaps his younger brother had really died in their hands because it was impossible for ordinary cultivators to kill Li Yunyu. Let's speed up and enter the passage as well. Li Boyo's voice was loud and firm. He would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. Regardless of whether the people who killed Li Yunyu were Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, since someone had pointed out this point, it proved that it was possible. He wanted to avenge his younger brother and would not let go of any possibility. However, the most important thing now was not to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, but to obtain the inheritance of this ruin. As Li Boyo's voice fell, the cultivators in his team nodded one after another. I'll take the lead in a while. You guys follow behind me. Don't get separated by the skeleton army. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do. Li Boyo reminded the people behind him. Under such circumstances, everyone could only move forward together. Once they were separated by the skeleton army, the others would not be able to rescue them in time. Senior Brother Li, don't worry. We understand. The cultivators in the team revealed a look of understanding. Even though the skeleton army in front of them was very frightening, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only had 9 people and dared to charge in. In comparison, their team had more than 20 people. Their combat power was much stronger than the other party. The next moment, Li Boyo and the others also joined the battle. Sure enough, since Li Boyo and the others appeared, the skeleton army split up to deal with them. As a result, the pressure on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others lessened significantly. After all, they had lost half of their opponent. Naturally, they no longer felt as oppressive as before. The timing of Li Boyo's appearance is really timely. They've solved a big problem for us. A smile appeared on Xiren's face. Previously, the situation had forced him to force a smile. Now that the pressure had lessened, he felt much more at ease. Chapter 40-53. They were the first group to reach this place, and they could not be overtaken by the other party. They had taken great pains to seize the initiative, and they had to grasp it firmly in their own hand. After all, they had spent so much effort to reach this place. According to their judgment, the path ahead had always been a test. Perhaps there would be treasures behind them. If they were overtaken by the other party here, it would be too disappointing. Following Shangguan Yingying's words, everyone could not help but straighten their expressions. Junior sister Shangguan is right. We have to charge forward with all our might. Bailey Hongzhuang gently nodded her delicate head, and the sound of her guqin poured out. Vigorous yuan power was mixed in the sound of her guqin and formed a straight attack under her control. Bailey Hongzhuang's guqin opened the path, and Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue's attacks followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, widening the path once again. At the same time, Wen Ziren and the others were not slow at all. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two had opened the path, they rushed forward as fast as they could. Before the skeleton army came in full force again, they advanced as fast as they could. Although this method consumed a lot of yuan power, it was undeniable that their speed was not slow. Li Boyo and the others were also attacking with all their might. The power that the 20 over people exploded with was naturally very terrifying. Just like how they had been able to enter the ruins at the fastest speed, one could see how powerful their combat power was. Their speed was not slow at all. The skeleton army's numbers were extremely terrifying and their powers were extremely powerful. On a normal day, they often went to the training grounds to train and understood these skeletons very well. Not only that, their combat power was the strongest in the Crimson Moon sect, and they had worked together for a long time. Their tacit understanding was extremely high. They had originally thought that their speed would definitely surpass Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, they had never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would advance at a speed that was not any slower than theirs. Instantly, their eyes were filled with a thick sense of astonishment. I did not expect that although the number of cultivators from Penglai Palace is small, their fighting style is very special. They are able to maintain this speed even when surrounded by so many skeletons. They are quite capable. Qian Feilong's eyes flashed with astonishment. As an expert of the Crimson Moon sect, his eyesight was naturally not bad. Recently, Bailey Hongzhuang was really in the limelight. He also knew that the sect had sent people to recruit her, but they were not successful. Because of this, he had always been very curious about Bailey Hongzhuang. He wanted to know what kind of person could actually make such a name for herself. After all, according to his understanding of the situation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had only been on Penglai Island for a year. In such a short time, they were able to directly become inner disciples of Penglai Palace and obtain the recruitment of the 3 major forces. This ability was really not something that ordinary people could have. Now that he saw them, he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also very strong. In comparison, he could not have reached this step at such a young age. It seems that we have underestimated them before. We have to go all out now. Otherwise, we might really let these people take the initiative. That would be terrible.